if you forget to address this issue when designing a workshop, it will result in hours of time researching and trying to find the perfect engagement tools, platforms, activities, disengaged and bored participants, and a lot of wasted time and no results. But if you answer this one question right at the start, you will create the most impactful workshop that creates more results, referrals, and reviews from your participants. And knowing this will also make every single decision in your experience design process easier. So what is this magical question that you're talking about? It's all about the purpose of your workshop, the purpose of your meeting, the purpose of your gathering, answering the question of why do you gather people before you plan anything is really important. So if you're about to click away from this video because you're thinking, well, I already know this, that's nothing new. I already know how to create a learning outcome, start with the end in mind. It's not rocket science. Sure, writing down a learning outcome is a great start, but there's so much more we can do to ensure that we design meaningful, impactful, and transformational experiences every single time. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my step-by-step process and questions that I ask myself before I start designing a workshop. And if you stay until the end, I'll even share some tips on how I get into the zone and use all of the things that I do at the very beginning of planning and make sure that I remember them and can get the results that I want for my participants in the meeting, in the experience itself. So let's start by talking about why it's so important and so crucial to get clear on the purpose before you start doing anything. The person who introduced me to this idea was actually Priya Parker and her book, The Art of Gathering, which is to this day one of my top recommended resources for anyone who's leading groups. In person, virtually, it doesn't matter. All of the things she talks about applies to any type of experience where you bring people together. So if you get clear on your purpose, it helps you make some easier decisions as you're planning your experience. It helps you decide who is supposed to be there, who needs to be there. It helps you figure out what the best engagement tool or platform you should be using if you're doing this in a virtual space. And it helps you understand how to structure the experience, what to include, but also what to exclude, because let's face it, most of us probably struggle in trying to do as much as possible in the short time that we have left. So often we have to cut things that are really important, at least we think they're important. If you have a clearly defined purpose, it will actually make that a lot easier. Priya Parker says the purpose of your gathering is more than an inspiring concept. It's a tool, a filter that helps you determine all the details, grand and trivial. And you might be thinking, oh, I already have a purpose, but Priya Parker really gets clear on that a category is not a purpose. She talks about I'm getting married or I'm hosting an event, a meeting about a new product release is not a purpose. The more specific we get, the more impactful the gathering will be. So let's figure out how to get clear on your purpose. And to me, that starts with the end. And this is my little Notion template that I created to design my experiences, which has a bunch of my virtual experience design framework in here. But there's this section on the top that I want to zoom in a little bit, because this is where I really start to define the purpose and answer some questions before I even design anything. And it starts with, who is this experience for? Who is the audience? So in this case, this is an event where I'm using my Ask Deep Questions cards to really turn strangers into friends really quickly. So the audience in this case are people who want to make new friends, but struggle to get beyond small talk. And then there's some other questions that I usually like to think about, like what might participants be thinking before the experience? And this really helps when designing the first activity, your intro. If you want to make sure that you get buy-in from your participants, getting clear on what are the people that are usually sitting in the first row with their arms crossed, or maybe in the back row with their arms crossed, and like, who is this person and why should I listen to them? Those are the thoughts that I write down here to make sure that I can address them somewhere. But then the other ones are all future focused. Like, what do I want participants to share in the chat after it, or on a feedback form? Like, what are the types of thoughts that I want participants to have that they then hopefully share with me at the end of an experience in the chat, when I'm asking, okay, what was your biggest takeaway? What feedback do you have about this experience? And then this one is maybe my favorite question. How do you want participants to feel after the experience? Because so much is about feeling. There's this quote by Maya Angelou that people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I think this is so true. It's one of my main questions that I always ask myself, like, how can I make people feel? Also thinking of how might they have felt before. So in this case, event about turning strangers into friends, it might be that they're feeling disconnected. Maybe they're feeling a little bit lonely. And at the end, I want them to feel more connected to each other. What I want them to share in the chat, well, I want them to share that, oh my God, I can't believe that the time is already up. It's been 2 hours, have gone by so fast. Wow, I want to come to the next one. When is the next event? And then the next question is, well, what actions do you want participants to take? Because let's face it, it's much easier to click away from a virtual experience on Zoom than to walk out of an in-person event. So if you do keep people's attention, if you keep them engaged and they're staying until the very end, what action would you like them to take? Like, if there is a decision that needs to be made, maybe that's the action you want them to take. In my case, the action I want them to take is share their contact information with somebody else that they've just met and set up a one-on-one Zoom call. And lastly, I want to give you a little bonus facilitator tip on how do I get into the zone and how do I actually make sure that all of those questions that I answered at the very beginning of the design process still are top of mind when I'm about to facilitate. Because sometimes you start designing a workshop months and months before you actually show up with your participants. So I always like to take a moment before everyone shows up on Zoom or in the room and really get in the zone. And this starts with playing some pumping music, really loosening up my body and shaking out everything. I have a specific playlist of songs that are all copyrighted, so I can't play them in this YouTube video, but those are the ones that I listen to every single time. And then I also like to take a deep breath and visualize what the end of my experience looks like. Like, what are the chat messages that I want to be showing up in the chat? How do I want participants to feel? I'll actually read through the things I've written when I first started planning this and remind myself of that and actually visualize it. If you've ever heard athletes do visualizations, you know how powerful it can be to actually imagine how we are reaching our goals. Our brains actually can't decipher if it is happening for real or if we're just imagining it. So when you use visualization as a tool, it can become so powerful that it doesn't feel like you're doing this for the first time. It feels like you've been doing that many, many times before. So sometimes I even take time to visualize, especially if it is a more high stakes experience. I like to visualize this several times in the week leading up to the experience. And then at the end, I do take a Post-it. I try to write down, okay, what is like one sentence, one statement that helps me set an intention for this experience. If you're watching this, I would love to hear your pre-experience rituals. How do you get in the zone in the chat? And let's make sure that we comment on each other's posts. One of the things I want to do more here on YouTube is create a bit of a community of the people who are watching this video. I just recently hit 2,000 subscribers, so I'm very excited about all the new people that are here. So introduce yourselves, share something useful in the comments, and let's make sure that we support each other. Okay, so now that you have the purpose for the experience, what's next? Well, I have 2 tools that I've actually just released that might help you make sure that you add some human connection elements to your experiences. And the first one is what I showed you earlier. I created this whole Notion template for a event flow. I call it the virtual event flow template. It's using a framework that I teach where you have different activities like unofficial starts. I think I already skipped the welcome. There's ice melters, community agreements. There is a structure that I use every single time when I create an experience, and that actually makes it so much easier to have this guide to follow along. So this is now available for anyone who joins the connection activities database, which is the other thing that I would love to introduce you to if you haven't heard, because this is something really new that I've just been launching. It's only been available for people on my email list, but now anyone can sign up and get this library of activities that help you increase increase engagement, and increase connection, but also deepen the connections for your participants. So make sure you check out the link below and have a look at this, because if you are always struggling to get new, fresh ideas for your experiences, for your meetings, this will be a really great resource. And if you're planning a lot of workshops, events, gatherings, then having that template plus the activities will be a really quick way to build something impactful, meaningful, inclusive, engaging, transformational. If you've been using this, let me know in the chat, and if not, I highly recommend that you sign up today.